Now, we're joined on the line by Newstalk's courts correspondent Frank Greaney to give us the very latest on the Regency Hotel murder trial. Frank, good morning. How are you doing?
Good, lads.
This trial is obviously dominating the front pages day in, day out. I think it's about a week since we spoke to you last. What's been going on in the meantime?
Well, we've had lots of evidence, as you would imagine, since we last spoke, Ger. We've heard from civilian witnesses, some people who were at the boxing weigh-in when the shooting started, when David Byrne ultimately lost his life. We've heard from a lot of Garda witnesses. We've heard post-mortem evidence. You know, we heard the cause of death from the then deputy state pathologist. We've watched an awful lot of CCTV evidence, and we've heard some evidence too in relation to the seizure of 3 AK-47 assault rifles believed to be used in the Regency shooting. I suppose immediately after you and I last spoke, Ger, a number of civilian witnesses were called. We heard from 2 press photographers who were at the event. Now, neither of them were covering the actual boxing event, and this was a boxing weigh-in ahead of an event at the National Boxing Stadium that was due to happen the following day. Obviously, that was cancelled after what transpired at the boxing weigh-in at the Regency Hotel on the 5th of February 2016. But we heard from Colin O'Riordan. Now, he was the chief photographer with the independent newspapers back in February of 2016, and both he and crime reporter Robin Schiller were dispatched to the boxing weigh-in on the off chance that some people that were of interest to the newspaper might be at that event. Now, he was told not to bring any camera equipment, so whatever photographs he was planning to take at the event were going to be taken on his smartphone. He said that he arrived there first. Robin Schiller arrived a short time later. They went into the event. This was happening at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They went in, and Robin Schiller said that he had spotted Daniel Kinahan. Daniel Kinahan, as we all know, was one of the owners of MGM. MGM was one of the promoters of this event, the Clash of the Clans. He and Matthew Macklin, the boxer Matthew Macklin, set up MGM in Marbella in Spain. Robin Schiller spotted Daniel Kinahan in that event. He brought that to Colin's attention, and after the 2 men were satisfied that they had, I suppose, satisfied their brief, they decided to leave. And just outside the Regency Hotel then, as they were leaving, they heard a loud noise. Robin turned to Colin and said that it sounded like a gunshot. And Colin O'Riordan gave evidence then last week of seeing 2 armed Gardaí, or for all intents and purposes they looked like armed Gardaí, running up the steps into the Regency Hotel. And he said he noticed that they were carrying AK-47s, and he thought that was unusual because he didn't think Gardaí carried AK-47s. He said there was another man armed with an assault rifle and tactical gear that was following them a little bit behind them, but he was following them inside the hotel. And he said that he didn't want to bring this person's attention to him. He was standing at the end of the steps. So he stayed there and he tried to look inconspicuous. But ultimately he watched 3 armed men walking into the region, or running into the Regency Hotel armed with assault rifles. He said he heard shots being fired. And from where he was standing just outside the hotel, he could see into the reception area. He could see a man on top of the reception desk with a gun. He said he was pointing this gun at somebody who was behind the reception desk. He said he didn't fire. He jumped back down off that desk. He heard more gunshots, and he described then, minutes later, the 3 men leaving the hotel, and he said that he was in fear for his life at this point. So he just put up his hands and he said, "Guards, I don't know where to be," and he watched as they got into a van that left the scene soon afterwards. We also heard from another press photographer. This is a man called Ernie Leslie. He was a freelance photographer back in 2016. He was dispatched to the boxing weigh-in, just like Colin O'Riordan and Robin were, with another reporter, Alan Sherry. This was on behalf of the Sunday World. And he described approaching the hotel. He said he was outside. He heard a commotion. He heard noises. He saw people running from the hotel. And he did think that the noises sounded like gunshots. But this was 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday, and he thought surely not. But he did become concerned when he saw people rushing out of the hotel. And he said that his attention was drawn to a silver van that was parked outside the hotel. He said the driver's window was open as he and Alan approached. And he said that he noticed a hand coming out the window and the barrel of a weapon. He said instinctively he grabbed his camera, and he noticed somebody running towards them as he did so. And again, instincts kicked in, and he took a number of photographs, 7 or 8 frames. This photograph, we now know, is the photograph that appeared on the front page of the Sunday World of a man in a flat cap and a man with a wig dressed as a woman running from the scene. Both were armed with handguns. We also heard from James McGettigan. James McGettigan's family owns the Regency Hotel. He was working that day, and he described at about 2:30 being in the bar area. He heard a commotion. He said that three, again, for all intents and purposes, three men who looked like armed Gardaí came into the bar area, told everyone to get on the ground. He said that he assumed that there, had been an incident locally, that he came out of the bar. He went over to one of these men. He said that this person was completely covered up. He could make out his eyes, but nothing else. He was holding a gun. That gun was being held towards him, and he expected him to identify himself as a guard and to explain what was going on, but he didn't. He said that they were looking for the boxers. They were screaming, looking for the boxers. Where are the boxers? He said they stayed in the bar for maybe less than a minute, and they left. He heard more gunshots, and he said he became concerned, and he said, maybe looking back a little bit naively, he said he ran into another room to raise the alarm, and he was actually the one that rang the Gardaí. So they were, I suppose, the civilian witnesses that we heard from immediately after we last spoke, Ger.
It's really shocking when you paint the picture of exactly what was going on and just how different people react under extreme terror, really. The instincts of the photographer to take photographs, that's so ingrained, but also that kind of sense that you see Gardaí and you actually feel safe. You think, okay, this is going to be fine here. I'm in the company of somebody who knows what they're doing, and that evidence really brings home just how many people were caught up in this.
Yeah, and I think the prosecuting barrister, Sean Gallant, touched on that exact point, Ger, in his opening address. Shots had been fired in the hotel. There were about 250 people there. As you can imagine, panic struck. People were fleeing for their lives. They were looking for exits. And then they spotted Gardaí coming in, and that just caused even more confusion, particularly when they also started firing shots. We heard and we saw CCTV evidence last week, and at various points since we've spoken, we've been shown, from different points of view of the prosecution's case that it's trying to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. You get the feeling that CCTV is going to feature heavily. There were lots of cameras both inside and outside the Regency Hotel that captured what happened on that day. We saw two of the gunmen, again, the man with the wig dressed as a woman, and also the man with the flat cap, who we now know is a man called Kevin Murray, a dissident Republican who was one of the gunmen on that day. He has since passed away. We were shown CCTV footage of them entering the hotel through a laundry room entrance. We were shown the footage of the three men dressed as armed Gardaí entering the hotel. At 2:32, we were shown footage of David Byrne running, in the middle of a crowd, clearly identifiable in the footage that we were shown, running from the Regency suite where the boxing weigh-in had been taking place, running towards the reception area. He stops, he comes back in shot, seemed to be running back towards the suite from which he had come from, and then turns on his heels again and goes back to the reception area. And we know that that's where he was shot 6 times by 2 of the tactical men. There was also a very distressing image shown just shortly after that of David Byrne's feet just out of shot, clearly lying on the ground. This was after he had been shot. We heard Tactical 1, or the armed raider that was described in court as Tactical 1, shot him. He hit the ground. Tactical 2 shot him. Tactical 2 went back and coldly and calmly shot him in the head and body. In the post-mortem evidence, the then Deputy State Pathologist, Dr. Michael Curtis, gave evidence of going to the scene that evening. There was a forensics tent in the reception area. Inside it lay the body of David Byrne. He was lying up against the desk. His head was lying in a pool of blood, and Dr. Curtis said from that preliminary examination it was very obvious that he had suffered catastrophic gunshot wounds to the head. He gave, and I won't go into them in any detail because they are quite graphic and distressing, but he gave some very detailed evidence about the post-mortem he carried out the following day, and ultimately his conclusions were that David Byrne had died from 6 gunshots to the head and body, fired from a high velocity weapon. And he said that if death wasn't instant, it would have been rapid. turning back to that CCTV evidence, we see the armed raiders leaving the hotel. We see a van leaving the vicinity of the hotel. We see 6 men running up a nearby laneway that runs alongside St. Vincent's GAA Club. And it is the prosecution's case that at the top of that lane were the getaway vehicles. The van was found burnt out at Charlemont Estate a short time later. We were also shown CCTV footage from the day before, Ger, and this showed Patrick Dowdall, the father of a former Sinn Féin councillor, Jonathan Dowdall. Both of them men have been sentenced to, Jonathan Dowdall got 4 years in prison. His father, Patrick, got 2 years for facilitating what happened at the Regency Hotel that day by making a hotel room available to the criminal organisation behind the attack. We see CCTV footage of Patrick Dowdall arriving at the scene at about 7:30 in the evening before. He seems to check in. He hands over some cash to the receptionist. He's handed key cards. He goes to the second floor to room 2104. He stays there for about 10 minutes. He then leaves the hotel. 1 hour later, then we were shown footage of a taxi pulling up, a man getting out of that taxi, doesn't go to reception area, goes straight up to the second floor, again to room 2104. That man we now know was Kevin Murray. Kevin Murray came out of the room at about 10 o'clock. He had gone into it with a bag. He came out of it without the bag. He is seen leaving the room the following morning, again with the bag, and leaves the hotel at that point. A PSNI officer gave evidence, and he identified Kevin Murray as being the person in that photograph that was taken by Ernie Leslie. We were also shown CCTV footage of the movement of various vehicles around the city in the lead up to the shooting, and this is the case, I suppose, against the other 2 men that we haven't spoken about, who were sitting in the dock alongside Gerry The Monk Hutch, 2 Dublin men, Paul Murphy and Jason Bonney, both in their 50s. Now, they're not accused of murder. They're facing and have denied a less serious charge, that of facilitating the murder by, I suppose, contributing in the sense of they are accused of offering logistical support through the provision of certain vehicles. There are identification issues. The prosecution will have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they are the persons seen in various clips that have been shown to the judges over the past few days. We've also heard evidence, Ger, of the seizure of 3 AK-47s from the boot of a car. Now, this was on the 9th of March 2016, so 1 month, or to be exact, 33 days after the shooting. A Garda intervention team was dispatched to a location just outside Slane, County Meath on that day. They stopped a Donegal Reg car. It was being driven by a Donegal man called Shane Rowan. He is an IRA man. He subsequently pleaded guilty to firearms offences and IRA membership. He has been jailed for 7.5 years. They opened up the boot, and hidden inside the boot they found 3 AK-47s. They also found loaded magazines. These were taken away for analysis. The car was analysed. That burnt out van, the suspected getaway vehicle, was also analysed. And yesterday we heard from a ballistics expert, a Detective Sergeant David O'Leary, who was physically handed one by one 3 AK-47s. Now, he analysed those weapons, and before he gave his evidence yesterday, he checked to make sure that they were safe. He assured the court and the judges that they were, and he gave evidence of inspecting those weapons. We heard that they were Kalashnikov variant rifles. They came from Romania, China, and the former Yugoslavia. He said the bullets that were found at the Regency Hotel, the spent cartridges after the bullets were fired, he said he examined those, and after examining both the weapons and those discharged cartridges, he formed the opinion that the bullets that were fired at the Regency Hotel, the 6 bullets that took David Byrne's life, were fired from the 3 weapons that were found in the boot of that car that was stopped just outside Slane 1 month later.
Strike marks noted yesterday as well in that ballistics discussion as well, Frank?
That's right, Shane. There was a lot of detailed evidence from Detective Garda O'Leary. He did go and examine the scene after the shooting as well, and he noticed and referenced a number of strike marks. And he said that this strike mark, one strike mark in particular, was found just to the right of the stage where the weigh-in was taking place that day back in February 2016. And he gave very detailed evidence of where and how they found various cartridges, that were scattered around the floor of the reception area and also inside in that suite. It was fascinating to hear the evidence just in relation to the firearms, and actually seeing the weapons physically in court yesterday being taken out of evidence bags and being handed to the witness, and then the drama of Detective O'Leary physically examining the weapons just to make sure that they were safe. But aside from all of that drama, you have to remember that a life was taken in all of this. It is the prosecution's case that those weapons were used to kill David Byrne. And Gerry The Monk Hutch, who is sitting in the dock, listening intently with headphones on. He does need the assistance of a hearing aid. He has pleaded not guilty to this charge. He is facing the murder charge. And as I said earlier, the two men in the dock beside him have pleaded not guilty to those lesser charges of helping the criminal organisation.
Frank, good stuff. We'll leave it there. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
No bother. Thanks, lads.
That's Newstalk reporter Frank Greaney giving us the update on that trial.